The only other thing that I wanted to get into that we didn't yet is and it actually fits now, the equipment itself. Um, most of Jux's equipment that I worked on came from Ozone. At that time it was ADATs. You know, it's funny, I came across like some video footage of me mixing at L's just last night and posted it to Instagram. And it's funny, like next to me is like a stack of 24 tracks of ADAT. And I can't even imagine like doing recording sessions now where like you're controlling ADATs, or even doing mix sessions where you have to repeatedly bring three tapes in sync back to a marker point just to do your job. So it was the old days, man. And like a lot of the this is for like the equipment nerds, but like the stuff that we had at Ozone, we had like legitimate Pultecs, like not plugins. We had like three Pultec EQs. We had a Tube Tech EQ. We had an Avalon preamp. We had LA2As, like compressors in there. And we had a bunch of effect stuff. And I thought it was normal to have that stuff in a rack, which it's not. And back then it was just like quality older equipment that people knew worked. Today it's like those, if you look those things up, those are like vintage pieces
Right.
that are really hard to get a hold of for any amount of money that is reasonable. And so all of that stuff I found out when Ozone closed, I had no idea was actually John Hancock's equipment. So John Hancock owned all of that vintage stuff and basically leased it to Ozone, or at least lent it out to Ozone. And then L bought everything else. He bought the board, which was a Mackie D8B. Um, Interesting board that maybe we'll talk a little bit further about in another episode or format or whatever. He bought the racks. He bought all like the multi effect gear, which is some of the stuff that I have today. I went back and rebought a lot of stuff that I used to use then. Like, so I'm looking at my rack now, but like, Digitech TSR 12, Yamaha Rev 7, like these are just multi effects units that at the time were like undervalued and today are still a little bit undervalued, but gave us the sound that we had at Ozone and gave me the sound that I had at Chooks. And that's why some of the records in recent years, since I got an analog board here in the studio here, like maybe some of the records are sounding a little more fuller and a little more like what I used to do back in the days, because now I have some of that equipment back again, which I didn't have the ability to do for a long time. But yeah, I mean, L bought all that stuff, with I presume like whatever label advance that he had gotten to start Jokes from Caroline, like a lot of that got invested into building the studio out. And yeah, and the rest of it went back to John, went back to Hancock. And I think some of that stuff got moved in and out when I wasn't around. I don't you would think that me and my role that I would actually be the one moving that. I think I helped take it apart. I actually took some of that stuff too. I had a Hughes phaser. It was my secret weapon for decades. It finally broke recently. It just stopped working, but it was kind of like more of like a prosumer level piece that people would put in their stereo collection to kind of widen out like a stereo mix in their audio file room or whatever. And I used to use it to just straight phase stuff because that's what Vassal's taught me to do with it. He loved it because he was like, "Oh, airline pilots use this to fucking phase out noise when they're flying. Like Hughes makes the same equipment." And he would bug off of it. But so I had that. I took a rack that I got rid of. I still have a red MIDI cable to this day. This is really getting into nerd territory here, but I have this red MIDI cable right here that is still being used. That definitely came from Ozone, and I remember it because it's red. But so I don't know. That's how much it meant to me at the time, and that's sort of the story of the equipment part of it. Once we got set up at L's, I helped set that studio up, plugged everything in, replicated what we had at Ozone, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, that's dope. You know, that you were able to kind of carry that lineage over to the next studio.